Welcome to the first episode of Birds Words Podcast, where grit and faith meet. Today we have Adam Parker, the founder of Blue Anvil, a training institute transforming law enforcement culture in the developing world so that justice can flourish for all. Adam holds his bachelor's degree in criminal justice, his master's degree in justice administration. He was awarded the College of Behavioral Sciences Student of the Year Award in 2009, Officer of the Year Award for the Metro Nashville Police Department in 2011, Exemplary Service Award for the MNPD in 2016. Now, as the old saying goes, where we start is not where we finish. So please forgive the microphone quality. I'm interviewing Adam, who's across the world, serving in Asia. I'm still learning, figuring out the technology, and I hope that the quality of the content makes up for any hurdles that you might have as you listen. It will get better. So if you want to hear about a missionary's efforts, pursuing Jesus and justice, exposing some high levels of corruption, then keep listening. You're across the world right now in Asia, and I'm honored to have you.
Man, I'm glad to be here. It's an exciting opportunity to share a little bit about what's going on in the wider world and how God's working.
So I believe the last memory that I have of us together was in a low-lit restaurant in Nashville, and you were a sergeant at the time, and
That's right.
you were working in the ministry of reconciliation in some different forms and fashions, and I just remember, and that was years ago, and it's crazy now that almost a decade later, we've reconnected. You're across the world somehow, and I think you've got some great things to share. So I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah,
All
brother.
right.
I mean, it's always been a philosophy. Like as we're going, man, whether we're in the States or abroad, like just trying to pursue the kingdom and His values.
Yeah, amen to that. Kingdom mentality. That's easy to forget sometimes when I'm trapped in the here and now of where we're at in the States. You know, there's a lot going on out there in the world, isn't there?
There sure is, dude.
All right. So, College of Behavioral Sciences Student of the Year in 2009. Man.
Wow. You're digging it up, dude. I didn't think you'd bring that up.
I'm bringing it up. So, does studying come naturally? How does one get that? Can't say that's on my wall, you know?
No, dude. Okay, so this is kind of funny. We've been having this conversation with our staff recently about, generally people are on like one side of the spectrum or the other. You got people with high IQ, low EQ, or people with high EQ, low IQ. I'm not high on either of them, but I lean towards the E side. And I don't know how I got that other than just schmoozing up to my professors and being nice and being willing to work hard, though my grades weren't excellent. But, just really, it was just being full of heart and caring. I think that's probably what earned that award a long time ago.
Well, it matters, and that's not the only one. There's a couple more I'm looking at here. Officer of the Year. You don't do anything just for the month or the week, you know. You just go big, right? Officer of the Year, Student of the Year, Exemplary Service Award, and I know we'll move off of this soon, but I just wanted to make a note that those things aren't just handed out, like candy. You got to go through the chain of command. Everyone has to sign off on them. Chief of police, mayor, a board, if I'm not mistaken. So that's cool. I appreciate what you did, what you're doing. Bachelor's degree, criminal justice, and you got your master's degree, right?
Yeah, a master's in justice administration, man. I mean, I care. I've got a big heart for justice.
Yeah, you liked it so much you kept going, huh?
Couldn't get enough, dude. And it gives a lot of credibility in the international space I'm working in, and sometimes I need that with government folks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have a well-qualified staff, which I was looking through Blue Anvil, which we'll get to in a minute, which you're the founder and director of. And I was looking through some of your staff members, and they seem to be well-qualified. Like, looks like you put together a good team for that to help you on that.
Dude, I couldn't be more satisfied with the relationships God's given me over these last 7 years living in South Asia. And the guys I get to work with every day, they're the real deal. I mean, not only are they competent in their work, they just love Jesus. And there are a minority of people who love Jesus in this country I'm working in, but they're just passionate. They want to to expand the kingdom through the pathway of justice. And I'm glad I get to work with them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, there's something that we're going to talk about, and you've dabbled, and not dabbled, I mean, you have excelled, but also tread down some pretty serious paths, some of which will test you mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, in all these arenas. And I asked you before this interview, what are some topics you're passionate about? And I could ask you those things are compassionate, credible law enforcement agencies,
Yeah,
character
indeed.
life development, healthy family life, Christian community. Some of the things that you've done, some people might argue that those things can't exist in those arenas.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, outside of Jesus, I don't think they can.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I also say in the police officer world, and you've got a massive theme of justice and a love for Jesus in your life. I think that the best officers are compassionate officers.
Yeah, that's right.
Can you talk about that just for a minute? A minister of justice, so to speak, and not have that or delete it out of your toolbox?
I don't think you can be an excellent police officer without compassion. You can be a police officer. You can get things done by the rule of the law. But at the end of the day, it's not just at a societal level that we're trying to enforce justice. We're also dealing with real people, right? And when I look at
Mm-hmm.
Jesus's life, man, he was, especially in the book of John, he was so relational. And whatever field we're engaged in, I don't think we can never, as like an ethical principle, be willing to sacrifice the person for the institution. I might be overstating that, but I'm pretty sure that's a core value of the Father. And I think we need compassion, but it's understandable how compassion fizzles out pretty quick when you're dealing with people who hate you and it's rough and you got administration that's on your back. That fizzles out pretty quick without a strong foundation.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right, and it's notable for anybody that can keep it intact while they're doing it, and
Mm,
continue to carry that with them through every journey in life. I feel like.
yeah, it is, man.
Okay, so Christian community. Did you see that a lot during police work?
Yeah, I mean, Christian community and compassion are linked like deeply. Without a healthy Christian community, I don't think we can remain compassionate and life giving in our interactions with people as police officers, as prosecutors, whatever we're doing in the justice field. So we, after graduating from university in 2009, from a small Christian school, moved to Nashville. I'd never been there before. I'd applied for law enforcement gigs all over the country, from Anchorage, Alaska, and Indiana, and Tennessee, and Kentucky, and ended up landing the spot in Nashville, but I was disenfranchised, I guess, with our faith. As you can imagine, maybe like yourself, I'm a bit of a passionate dude, right? Like my heart is full of
Mm-hmm.
feeling. I'm an emotional dude. And I wanted to see the gospel being lived out. And through my education life and through much of my church life, not always, but it wasn't characterized by deep dedication to our Father. It was usually, characterized by maybe shallow understanding or academic, pure intellectual assent, but not living it out in the gutters of life. And I didn't want that anymore. And so when we joined the police department in Nashville, my wife was a nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. She ended up moving to Nashville as well, where we met. And well, we met in Harding in Arkansas, but she moved and followed me to Nashville. Then we got married. But we wanted something more. We wanted rich. We wanted what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called life together. And wanted to form kind of an organic local house church with a mixed mashup of people from different denominations. And it ended up being a really rich, challenging, but rich season of life. Getting to know like that church is a rich community. It's founded in hard relationship. And that created a foundation to go do our jobs well, whatever they were.
Yeah, so Dietrich Bonhoeffer, yeah, that's some tough reads.
He's
If
good,
you're
man.
reading
He's
some
real
of
good.
that, I think Eric Metaxas wrote a book, and he tears into some of his writings a little bit, and he, I think, remember was big on that model, getaways, spiritual retreats, and things like that. So you bring up something really interesting, and I don't really like this word, but this corporate model. I feel like if when we say church or whatever comes to mind to people across the world, I'm not sure exactly what they have in mind, but I would say house church is not the most popular idea. Maybe, maybe not. And so that piques my interest. And I think that that is wonderful and great and in the biblical model. So you're in Nashville. You're not going to a big brick and mortar place. You're meeting in home. I mean, what does that look like?
Well, we would rotate every week to a different person's house, and a different couple would facilitate the gathering. It wasn't like a preaching formal, it was more question and answer. Here's a topic, whether a book of the Bible or a topic from life that we're grappling with. We'd all come together, we'd break bread, we'd eat dinner, we'd spend time just enjoying each other in conversation. If somebody could play guitar, they'd whip that out, or we'd sing a cappella from our Church of Christ kind of background tradition. And then we just dig into it. We'd spend hours together, like just pursuing the Lord and pursuing relationship with one another. And it was
So you just enjoyed being together all the time. It endeavored to do a lot of different things and hobbies, and you shared life together, loved God, worshipped, and that's what it was about.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It wasn't just about a weekly gathering. It was about, being in close proximity to each other as well, geographically. So we were shopping at the same grocery stores. We were hanging out at the same parks. Yeah, we were living life in a more integrated way. And now, when I go back every 2 years to the States to visit folks and family and churches, a theme, maybe I'm seeing it better than I did in the past, but it seems like a lot of people are lonely. Like loneliness is like a definition of Western culture. And even broader than that, I even see it here to some degree. And man, Jesus doesn't want us to be lonely. I mean, he spent a lot of time with those he loved. And that's hard, but it's worthwhile. I'd rather be in a hard situation in community than in a hard situation alone. So let's pursue community. Well,
So did you ever, someone that you care about at this house church is talking too long, and you look at your watch and it's getting kind of close to the hour, and you're like, hey, cut it off, like
dude,
we got to go eat, we got places to be. Things y'all do.
yeah, I mean, thankfully we were eating together, so at least we were hungry, but we had some little babies we needed to get to bed. That was real, man.
No, that's great. Well, that sounds like a very unique experience. So I guess I've got a question. So let's jump back. You were raised in northern Indiana. Your parents are Christian.
They are? Yep, thank
Um,
God.
okay, and so you were raised in the faith. You got to see that kind of unfolding. I imagine you have here a mixed bag of rebellion and
Yeah, man.
self-righteous indignation. That's what you said about yourself. I mean, what's that about? What do you mean by that?
Well, I've got a friend named Tim Catchum, and he wrote a book called The Permanent Revolution. And he had this idea in this book that, I'm pretty sure it was him. Well, anyways, the idea that we all have these God-given character traits or personality tendencies or gifts, and whether we use them for the kingdom or not, they're getting used. And once we come, and get baptized and follow Jesus, like the Father redeems them for his kingdom purposes, and then we submit them to him. And while I was raised in a Christian home and I had excellent parents, I couldn't ask for better. I was just a hard driving, emotional, hard to control young man with a lot of passion, right? And passion's kind of like a cool touch point word, I think, for the last 20 years, maybe. Like if you got passion, that's good. And it is. Passion is good, but passion unrestrained is nothing other than dangerous. There's a proverb that I try to teach my boys, says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a man who lacks self-control. Or better be a patient man than a warrior, one who practices self-control than one who takes a city. And I was a young man with lots of passion, but without any self-control. I was undirected. I wasn't submitted to the Lord. And I caused a lot of relational damage. I caused a lot of damage with my parents. I caused a lot of damage at my school, because I had this idea of what was good and right, but it wasn't submitted to God. And that turns out to basically be Pharisaical. I mean, I was walking around these Pharisee robes, essentially, thinking I had some solid armor on, when really I was the bad guy. I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's funny. I love that proverb, as a matter of fact. I think that that's excellent and wise saying to help us live our lives. And that wording about, you know, self-control makes a man mightier than the man who can take a city. And I feel like that's easy to dismiss, but I would say during these times, they had seen their fair share of battle. And
Yeah.
so I don't think we mean like going to the refrigerator. I mean, I think there's an element there that there is some brutality that's involved and some serious strength involved in taking the city. And someone who is able to control their spirit, that is a truly powerful thing. And he also brought something else up. I've heard someone say oftentimes the most stubborn traits in kids turns out to be such a strength when they get older. And
Yeah.
I'll also add in what you said, if you point them in the right direction. If you are absolutely stubborn, and it's the most frustrating thing as a parent, well, in my opinion, we need some really stubborn Christians who stand up for what's right and just doesn't quit. I
Yeah.
think there's
Amen.
something to be said about
I
that.
agree relentlessly.
So, bullies, you have had your run in with a fair share, maybe?
Yeah, man. Ironically, both sides of that coin. You know, sometimes I was the kid getting beat up in the back of the bus. I remember that vividly, trying to stand up for the kid that was a little bit smaller than me getting beat up by the bully. And then other times I was the bully in a self-righteous way, thinking I was doing God's work as a sophomore in high school and hurting a lot of people and not representing Jesus well, thinking I was. So yeah, both sides of that coin. But what it pointed to, I think, like you just said, was this compass needle that was off. Like it was founded, it was floating in this idea of justice. Like God gave me a heart for justice. I just didn't know how to point it accurately. I didn't understand that Christianity was more than just believing in Jesus and then trying to be good. And what does that even mean? What does good mean? And it took me years, and I'm still discovering that, like, it's really about character development. It's about clothing ourselves in the full humanity of Jesus that Colossians says. And what does that mean? I didn't know for a long time, but when I started to figure it out, man, that really started to create a pathway, like wearing down a path through the forest, time and time again, walking it over and over again. It eventually became a road, like something easy I could traverse, and I knew where I was going.
Yeah, so that's an interesting realm to be in right there. And I have found myself there. The word I'm going to label it with is conflict. Conflict within myself. You want to do what's right, struggle with it, maybe even shed some tears over the wrong things. You do some good, you do some bad, and then you try to figure this thing out. And I think of these two scriptures, James 4, because they just rang out in mind. Passions at war within you. And that hits me, right? Because obviously you mentioned all these different passions, and sometimes our passions are at war within us. Sometimes I'm very passionate about the wrong thing,
Yeah.
which has to do with that compass you're talking about. But then also this Romans 7, I do the very thing I hate. So I mean, becoming this development, this character development, this process, instead of just uh, an immediate transformation of exactly what you're supposed to be at the age of 100, right? Or 500. So my question is, how do you balance it? You know, you're confused at this point. You're trying to stand up for people, trying to figure out what justice is and what who God is and what your relationship looks like. I mean, what do we do when passions are at war within us? Like, what's the go-to for that?
Well, I can tell you what it did to me, and then I can talk about how I handle it now. I remember, for instance, back in what year was it? Probably 2005, 2006. There was some ethnic genocide going on in Darfur. And I remember just seeing that, and I was so perturbed by it. I was perturbed is even too light of a word. I was destroyed internally by it. And I saw the church doing nothing. People weren't even praying about it. I'm like, Dad, all right, I got no money. Let me see your credit card just for a minute. Like, let's buy some tickets. Let's get out. We're flying out there, and let's just go do some work. Like, I love these. My dad's like, whoa, dude, hold on a second. What that ended up resulting in, that passion to do good, not understanding how to do good well, like focusing on the outcomes, ended up to leading to burnout, like walking away from the faith. All those warring passions inside, wanting to do good, not understanding how to do it, often causing harm when I'm not intending to. it just led to seeing the church not engaging in it like I thought they should be, like I thought I saw in the scriptures. Leads to me saying this is all a waste of my time. It led to nihilism, which I think is probably the predominant worldview right now, at least in the West. Like, what matters? Nothing matters. It's all a waste of time. And so I left the faith, and I was a pretty antagonistic dude. It was only for about a year, but I was angry at God, and I think I still knew He was there, but I was so angry that I was going to apply those misdirected passions at Him, foolishly, arrogantly, and He's a big God, He could handle it, but by His graciousness, He brought me back to Him, and in a gentle way, and in an impactful way, by taking me to the country of Africa. A brief story here. My mom had been praying. I didn't believe in God anymore. And a professor I knew said, hey, man, why don't you come out for a couple months to West Africa and just see if the Lord can do something in your life there. We got a group of about 10 people going out there. It's going to be like an internship under some families doing agriculture work and gospel proclamation in West Africa, right south of Mali, the country of Togo. All right, cool. Get to go to Africa, see some lions. Why not? I did some fundraising, got to go out there. And while we were out there, again, I'm angry at God. I'm saying I don't believe in Him. And we were doing.
Your professor know this at the time? Does your professor?
Yeah, he knows this.
He's got a feel on the situation.
Yep, he knows what's up. And he was a Bible professor in the book of Acts. And so we go out there, and this team of family missionaries had been working in this village called Chikpe, I believe the name of it was. And this is like bush, like rural Africa, mud huts. I mean, whatever you're thinking of, that's it. And so and there's this village chief, and he had recently decided to follow Jesus. And, this guy is the head of, I don't know, maybe 100 or so people in the village. They're animists. In the middle of his compound, he's got a clay altar that's pretty big, like the size of a bed, maybe. And on top of it is a bowl and like this obsidian knife. And they were at the end of their monsoon season, like their rainy season. And they didn't have any crop. There were no crops in the field. Like there had been no rain. It had been a drought the whole time we were there. And this man called the village together, and he starts speaking, and he's standing up on this altar, and he's like, hey guys, we've been sacrificing and praying to our ancestors for the rains. We've sacrificed wheat. We've sacrificed chickens. We've sacrificed all the way up to like cattle, right? And we've spilled the blood here to get them to bring the rain, and no rain has come. And then he gets pretty intense. It's like, but I want to tell you, like, there is a God who's going to bring the rain. And he takes this bowl, this ceremonial bowl, I don't know, maybe it's been there for generations as they've worshipped their ancestors, and this knife, and he just throws them down on the altar and breaks them. And, the people are gasping, like, this is kind of getting pretty intense. There's a lot of fear in animism. And he's just offended the gods, right? And
are you like hearing about this, seeing this unfolding? I mean, this is like something straight out of the Old Testament.
Right there. I mean, I'm on a mud bench next to these African villagers.
He's just tearing down the idols.
The real deal. And he's like, now watch. I'm going to pray to the God who can bring the rain and who will bring the rain. I'm like, oh, dang. I'm still like not really I'm not a believer. And I'm like, this dude's going to get killed. And so they end up praying, and we get in the vehicle. We drive back, an hour or two through the bush back to the little city that we're staying in. And I remember laying in bed, and I'm watching the stars on the top of this like Land Rover as we're going back. I'm laying on the top of it, and it's just crystal clear, right? I mean, Africa at night, that's pretty dark. It's just a plethora of stars like you've never seen before. And I'm like, there's no way. But I remember praying. I'm like, God, if you do this, like that's gonna. Not that it's just for me, but that's going to be impactful. Like, are you really out there? And I remember waking up that next morning to water coming in underneath our door because it had been raining so much that it was flooding our compound. And it rained and it rained and it rained for days. And it resulted in this whole village coming to Jesus. And I remember them saying stories that they created like this marching band with local drums, and they were just marching around to other villages proclaiming the goodness of God. Based on what it was. And that, I felt like, whoa, okay, maybe the world's a little bit bigger than I thought. Maybe God is working in different ways beyond my little bubble, and it's not all just about me. He cares about this villager kid too. And that's what started to draw me back towards him and to really, I don't know, in some ways start smoothing me out, giving me a more global kingdom Christian perspective.
Yeah, that's a big perspective. That is some powerful life experience right there.
It was good, man. I'm thankful for it.
I also want to point out that I think that sometimes we have a tendency to not look at God as a relational being.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like that's a theme in the back of my mind. Is this might be cliche, but checkboxing or checking boxes. I mean, that is the method is checkbox. We don't expect anything to happen. I believe that there's a large portion of people. We would have to define miracle, and I'm not talking about what extreme, whatever that these undefined words are. But I would even question. I would say some people, they believe in God, they consider themselves faithful, but they don't leave room for God working, like working, like by His power, bringing things to happen that otherwise would not happen. It's almost an uninvolved. I don't know. Have you ever picked up on that? Maybe in the States over there through traveling, that we try to kind of distance ourselves from God, but He's also the goal.
Yeah, dude. I think it's a self-protective measure that we don't want to believe too hard because then it might expose, it might put God up to the table to prove Himself or not. And we don't want to reach that point because it might shatter our worldview. Because what if He doesn't show up? And I've been there. But
Yeah.
I think we need to reverse how we're thinking about our triune God. Seems like, and N.T. Wright points this out in his book, like Broken Signposts, where he says, we're often trying to interpret Jesus and fit Him in to this understanding of the Father God. But he's like, we got to reverse that. He's like, Jesus Himself said he is revealing who the Father is. So I think first we need to look to Jesus. And then through Jesus, we understand the Father and we understand the Spirit. And Jesus is so deeply relational. So I think if we primarily look to Him, everything else will start to fit in place. But if we don't look to Him first, I think it's all going to be disjointed. And we're going to have a skewed view of who the Father and the Spirit are.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, is it Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God, or somewhere right around there? And if I orient the world or try to around me, I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be brokenhearted, lonely. I'm going to be messed up. But when we orient around Jesus Christ, yeah, I agree with you there. That Jesus is the source. I mean, Peter steps out of the boat. Keep your eyes on Him. That's very straightforward. But sometimes I also think you touched on this. It's a little scary. It's scary because if all this stuff that we're talking about, just everything, all this, the talking donkey in the Bible, all these things, if this stuff is real, there's some serious consequences at stake. There are souls in jeopardy. There are people that desperately need God and Jesus Christ for salvation. And obviously, I wholeheartedly believe that we need Jesus, and I mean, that's why we're here talking. But it also kind of puts it on me because it shows me how much pain is out there. And I don't know if you've ever felt this, but when I start looking, or if God shares His heart with me, and I start seeing the pain around me, you almost want to close it because you don't want to see it. Because if I see it, then I'm accountable, right? I'm like, I have to do something now. And that's where that compassion circles back around, right? So what are you going to do? You brought up some solid points there. So you fell away. You're disgruntled. This is your junior year in college.
Yeah, my junior year in college, I was gone.
And you go on this mission trip. Then you're reconvicted. So you lay up in your bed. You're trying to decide. So the water start pouring in. This thing has happened. So, I mean, what then? Like, how did you re-enter the relationship? Like, what happened there on a practical level?
I mean, it challenged my paradigm. It challenged my worldview that there is, maybe non-believer wasn't the right word. Maybe I had become a deist now that I got more language for it. Like, that there is this kind of creator God, but he's distant. He doesn't interact with the world. And all of a sudden, this God showed me he does interact with the world and he does care. And it's bigger than me, right? Like the world doesn't revolve around me. And that was a important lesson to learn. So what that resulted in was, digging into the word, starting to grapple again, understand him on his own terms. Who does he say he is? Coming back to the States, my dad and a couple other men starting to dive into apologetics, being able to answer the hard questions of our faith, like seeming discrepancies in the word or objections to how a God can exist. And learning answers to those questions created even more sure footing, which allowed me to launch with a sure footing into a career path that was, like you just said, surrounded by suffering. And when our eyes were open to it, we had to engage it. We had to do something with it, for it, and in the name.
So I assume when you're talking about a career that's surrounded by suffering, am I correct in assuming law enforcement there?
Yeah, that's it, man. I mean, that is a career. There's a few careers surrounded by suffering, but that's certainly one of them. And yeah, it was law enforcement.
And so at this time, and your wife is a Vanderbilt nurse at the time?
Yeah, she was a NICU and PICU, if you're familiar with those terms, a neonatal intensive care unit nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital.
Which, first, let me just say, I don't see how anyone does that. Phenomenal people, a phenomenal ministry there.
Really is.
Has to be tough. So just shout out to her for that. So you both are surrounded by this very, very burdensome and eye-opening, and sometimes I imagine very awful world that we can live in. So that's tough. And so you had mentioned you thought about going into the Secret Service, and you're like, I don't really know about that. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, man. That I had gone out to Chicago, was working on an internship with the Secret Service, met with them, had a letter from a state senator to get me into that pathway. And, at the time I didn't know that one of the major objectives or tasks of the Secret Service was dealing with online sexual exploitation of children. And I just thought they were the cool dudes in the suits who protected the president and got to drive fancy cars, and it was a status thing. I thought it would be cool to be Secret Service. But the Lord, and that would have been cool. But the Lord convicted me, like, hey man, you just want this to look cool. Like, and I want you to use these gifts and these passions that I'm starting to focus for my kingdom. And that doesn't mean talking up your sleeve in a suit with sunglasses. It probably means working a midnight shift in a lower income city with people addicted to cocaine and meth and beating up their wives and going and loving on them and showing them that there's a better way. And I'm so thankful he did, because, I mean, man, like day to day, we were interacting with people at the end of their ropes. And when people are at the end of their ropes, that's often when they're looking up for something. And if we can give them a hand and point them towards Jesus, that's a long-term qualitative change. That's a healthier family. That's a healthier community.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And very similarly, I feel like God showed me so much in those moments, those low-lit street corners and some nasty houses, some nice houses. No, and so many. I mean, so many opportunities, to the point where you have to be intentional, or you could fill up an activity sheet and just you get exhausted going from one thing to the other. But God is working in so many places, and so I do relate there, which is why I'm glad we've had that experience, and me too. So you pulled away from the Secret Service, and I've also heard sometimes those can actually be some paperwork heavy and somewhat boring at times jobs. Yeah. So you might have got a little more action in some.
I probably did, man.
Arenas. All right. So what's next? What's after Metro? 8 years there, house church. And I believe that's right around when I met you, and apparently you had some convictions going on behind the scene, because I certainly know with the diversity of Nashville in terms of religious breakdowns, I enjoyed a bunch of diverse groups of people from different backgrounds being to come together and get a job. I really enjoyed that and appreciated that. I still have good friends I'm in touch with that we have different views, but I call them right now. I'll go stop whatever they're doing, drive here, and help however I need. So, I mean, I know we love that about it. You are kind of looking at going somewhere else. I'm kind of launching deeper in. And I remember you kind of telling me about that. And so there's a unique story about how you got to Asia. I mean, what did you do? Spin a globe and you just hit that marker and landed up there? What happened there?
Man, if it only had been that simple. It's just
Right?
we discover our path, our calling while we're doing it. It's not just I think few people have a Paul on the road to Damascus moment. It's like bing, we're just feeling it out as we go. And I was surprised because after that trip to Africa, I love my country. I still love my country. I was a patriot in many ways, and I didn't want to go anywhere else. I wanted to serve my countrymen and through law enforcement. And I joked that over those 8 years, I had a lot of literally captive audiences to the gospel. Taking people to jail, and I probably broke so many laws. And I said, "Hey, bro, you don't get an option. I'm going to tell you about Jesus. You are loved. Let's pray for you right now before you get to the jail." So I chose that profession as a mission. My wife chose hers to be missional. We were part of a house church. We were working with Congolese refugees who had been placed in Nashville from the UN, and it was good. We were doing good work. We felt full of life. But then the Lord started shaking things up unexpectedly, us and some other members of our house church. And we started feeling collectively a sense of dissatisfaction, right? This is in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement where cops are already starting to feel under attack. And maybe that was part of it. I'm sure it was. But we started feeling a little bit discontent. We're starting to pray like, Lord, what's going on here? Why is there this unsettledness in our hearts? And he started putting in our pathway, really, it was the month of April and the month of May in 2014. He started throwing in our pathway all these connections to a country in South Asia, and not a big one. And actually, in my ignorance, my ethnocentric ignorance to a degree, I had never even heard of. And it would be things like, okay, so I'm working for the police department, and I needed to go buy some undercover police surveillance signs to prevent auto burglaries. So I'm sitting up there ordering these signs and strike up a conversation with the receptionist and find out she's a follower of Jesus. And she's like, yeah, my daughter is overseas in South Asia. I'm working at this company with victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation, providing them jobs and training. I'm like, oh, what's human trafficking? By this time it wasn't super popular. Not everybody knew what was going on with human trafficking. So she tells me about this country, what her daughter's doing. I'm like, okay, interesting. So I go home that night and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go out to Percy Warner Park and do some, a 5-mile trail, the Red Trail, if anybody's familiar with that. So I go out there and start running a trail, and it's like May, I think, at this point, and it's hot, and no one else is out there at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's one other dude, and we're running opposite sides of the loop. So we pass each other. We're like, hey, crazy guy. Hey, crazy guy.
What was you like the police officer? I mean, at this time, because you don't trust anybody. I mean, you thinking, are you keep an eye on this guy?
Yeah, what are you doing, you creeper out here? And so we pass each other again. This guy stops. We start weirdly having a conversation in the middle of the woods. Find out he's a believer as well. And his aunt and uncle, somehow conversation comes up that his aunt and uncle live in this country in South Asia and had been there for like 10 years trying to proclaim the good news. It's like, oh, wow, I just learned about this place yesterday. And so days go by, weeks go by, and we're gathering together at the house church, and everyone is having, we wrote a journal about this, on a daily basis in these 2 months, exposure contact to this little country. And it got to the point where I was like, man, what's going on? Like, Lord, are you trying to tell us something? Is this dissatisfaction, this unsettledness pointing us towards this location? Because a month ago, I didn't know it exists. Now I know basically everything about it, or I thought I did. So me and my buddy, we've been best friends since middle school. He was a neighbor. His wife was there. Both our wives were pregnant. We're like, hey, I've got some saved up time from court, some comp time. Let's go he was self-employed. Like, let's go take 3 weeks and let's just fly out to this country and see if the Lord's doing something. So our wives gave us their blessing, like, hey, go do it. Maybe get it out of your system. Go have a good trip.
Well, side note, you definitely care about the work-life balance if you're going for comp time instead of the money, right? So there's an indicator. Right? Every time you clock in for court, which I imagine is pretty frequently if you're working in like a 1 million-person city, I mean, you're just racking up hours left and right at this point. Not taking the money, you're looking for the health and the life. Okay, all right, so
that's right.
All right, let's fly across the world and see what this is about. Okay.
That was the biggest perk of our job, man. All that comp time to save up. So we booked these tickets for October of 2014, and I just get online. I'm searching on Facebook. I'm like, hey, Christian South Asian guy from this country, and there's one guy pops up. So I send him a message. His name's Ruben. I'm like, hey Ruben, me and my buddy are coming. Can you pick us up from the airport? He's like, sure. So we show up. This developing world airport. We land. It's hot. This guy waves.
You just got done listening to part 1 of Birds, Words podcast, stories where grit and faith meet, with our guest, Adam Parker. I'm John Birdwell, your host. I hope that you'll tune in and listen to part 2, where Adam is getting off the plane in Asia. He's starting off on a new adventure, and it will lead to exposing corruption, pursuing justice, and Jesus. Looking for you on the next show.